fast after getting to the destination in the Hanafi method. I'm not a specialist in the Hanafi method myself. I'm a specialist in the Shafi method. But in the Shafi method, if somebody reaches their destination, which is considered within the city limits of the place they are going, then if they are staying for 4 days or more, then they must fast. They're no longer considered a traveler, not including the day they arrive or the day they leave. 4 days or more, if they're staying in the place, then they have to fast the month of Ramadan. But if they are staying less than 4 days, then they do not have to fast the month of Ramadan because they're not considered residents, they're considered travelers. And the Hanafi method, you're excused while traveling for 15 days. So you have a lot longer time that once you reach the city limits, you have actually up to 15 days if you're considered traveling to not fast. But anything more than 15 days, you're no longer considered a traveler and must fast. So there's a difference between the time that you can be considered a traveler in the Shafi and the Hanafi method. But regardless, if you're coming back home to Seattle from your travels, and you reach within the city destination of Seattle, then you must, and it's Ramadan, you must start fasting Ramadan at least. Well, if you came before Fajr, right, then you don't have to fast. But if you arrive, let's say at nighttime, you have to fast the next day. Okay, you've reached your home. Traveling is when you're traveling to other than your home, right?
But it's better to fast anyway, right? If there is no travel on that date when we are away from our home, there's no travel on all those 3 days, we're just attending some meetings, it's okay to fast, right?
It's better to fast if you don't feel it's going to be too difficult or harmful while you're traveling. But you don't have to fast if you travel. If you're traveling, you don't have to fast, but it's better to if you feel it's going to be harmful. It's better to fast, but if you feel it's going to be harmful to fast while traveling or too difficult, then it's better to break your fast. Right. Question 1, the difference between breaking the fast versus skipping it. Breaking it, entered the fast but broke it due to some reason. Skipping, decided not going to keep it for traveling or sickness. So there's a difference between skipping or breaking. I mean, if you entered a fast and you broke it because of an excused reason, then you're allowed to do that, and you have to make it up later after Ramadan, and you have until the next Ramadan. If you break your fast for no excused reason, then it's considered sinful, and you have to make up that day immediately. Like as soon as Eid is done, you have to make up that fast immediately because you broke it without an excuse. Or if somebody's just lazy, they say, well, I don't want to fast Ramadan, or their iman is weak or whatever, they have to make up that fast immediately after the Eid. Of course, this is in regards to Eid al-Fitr, after the Eid, then they make that day up immediately. Again, if somebody's traveling or if they're sick, well, they're excused to break it, and it's not necessarily skipping it. Regardless, people have to still make their intention the night before to fast the following day. And they have to fast, and if an excuse comes up, then they can break their fast. And if it's an excuse, then they can make it up later. And if it is not excused, then they have to make it up immediately after Eid. The difference is one sins, one doesn't. The one who breaks their fast because of an excuse is not sinful. The one who breaks their fast without an excuse is sinful. That's the difference, and they have to make tawbah. They have to actually ask for repentance and then make that day up as well. Sighting the moon, alhamdulillah. We'll get into the next chapter, inshallah. And also, sisters, if sisters have any questions, please grab the postcards and a pen and ask the questions you have and write them down. Inshallah, we want to also answer sisters' questions, and we'll try to get them to the men's size, and maybe Sean can help with that. And then, inshallah, we can get the sisters' questions and answer them as well. We want to be balanced, fair and just. So one of the things, just before we get to the moon sighting, just very briefly, I just want to just go real quickly over a couple of hadith. The Prophet Muhammad says, every action for the son of Adam is for him or her, except for fasting. It is for me, it is for Allah. It's a hadith Qudsi, and I reward it accordingly, because Allah rewards it unlimitedly, because it's only for him and not for anything else, whereas other actions can seem to be for other people. And then he says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, fasting is a protection. If any one of you fast, they should not speak evil or shout out loud while fasting. And if anybody tries to curse them or insult them, they should say, Innani ana sa'im, truly I am fasting. And then they say, Walladhi nafsu Muhammad ibn yadi, and I swear by the one who Muhammad is in his soul is in his hands, that the saliva of the one who is fasting is sweeter to Allah than the scent of musk. This is not necessarily to your neighbor though, so be cautious, right? Your neighbor might not like the smell. Hello, I'm fasting. They might not. Like, oh man, yeah, you obviously are, right? So it's sweeter to Allah than musk, not necessarily to people. And then the person who's fasting has 2 moments of happiness. When they break their fast, they're happy, and when they meet their Lord, they're happy with the fasting that they did for His sake, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then another hadith, Prophet Muhammad says that truly in paradise there is a gate, it's called Rayyan, that the people who fast enter this on the day of judgment. Nobody else shall enter them except the people who fast. And it will be said, where are those who fast? They will stand, لَا يَدْخُلْ مِنْهُ أَحَدْ غَيْرُهُمْ. Nobody else shall stand up, they will only stand. And when they enter the gate of paradise for the people who fast, it will be shut closed, and nobody else shall enter. This is in Bukhari and Muslim. A special gate in paradise for the people who fast for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another hadith, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, مَا مِنْ عَبْدٍ يَصُومُ يَوْمًا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا بَعَدَ اللَّهُ ذَلِكَ يَوْمَ وَجْهُ عَنِ النَّارِ 70 خَرِيفًا. No one shall fast for the sake of Allah a day, except that Allah will distance by that day their face from the hellfire for 70 years. Your face will be distanced from the hellfire for 70 years by fasting one day for the sake of Allah. Imagine multiple days. And this is something that is muttafiq alayh in Bukhari and Muslim as well. And then another hadith is when the Prophet ﷺ says, this is one that's in Bukhari and Muslim as well, إِذَا جَاءَ رَمَضَانَ فتحت أبواب الجنة وأغلقت أبواب النار وصفدت الشياطين. Again, when the month of Ramadan enters, the gates of paradise remain open, their gates of hellfire are closed, and the shayateen, the major shaitans, are locked up. They're actually shackled. Okay, so any evil you see from yourself in the month of Ramadan is from yourself. You can't blame the shaitan, made me do it, or made me think it. The shaitan, the major one, is locked up. The minor ones are still out. The gates of heaven are open. Why? So the mercy of Allah is constantly flowing, and the good deeds that are sent are constantly accepted. And the gates of hellfire are closed, so that inshallah, that Allah His mercy is greater and forgives us for any of our sins. And the shayateen are closed up and locked up in the hellfire. And then, just to mention the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In Ramadan, this is what Ibn Abbas says, he was the most generous of people, and the most generous of all people, especially in Ramadan, when Jibreel alayhi salam met him, when they would recite Quran together, and they would go over it, he was the most generous. And they say that he was more generous than the blowing of a wind. You know, the wind, how it blows, and constantly goes, and gives. The Prophet was more generous in giving things out for the sake of Allah than a windy current. فَيُرْسِلُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى حِينَ يَلْقَى جِبْرِيلَ بِخَيْرِ رِيحٍ مُرْسِلَةٍ. And then in the last 10 days, as Aisha radiallahu anha says, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought the night to life, and he woke up his family, and he got serious. He shed the izar, which means like he tied his izar around his waist. Means he got serious. Like you say in English, you want to fight, you want to go, we're going to get serious, right? You roll up your sleeves, right? That's what the Arabs, they would do, is they would tighten up their izar and lift it up. That means, that's it, we're going to go now, right? So that's just some of the hadith that I wanted to cover regarding that. And then inshallah, getting into the moon sighting. Where does this come from? Moon sighting, local moon sighting, or such as seeing the actual moon. It comes from a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, "Sumu li ru'yatihi wa aftiru li ru'yatihi wa in ghumma alaykum fa akmilu 'iddata 30 min Sha'ban." It's also again in Muslim Bukhari. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Fast when you see the moon. Fast when you sight the moon, and break your fast when you sight the moon." So when you see the moon coming in, you fast, means it's Ramadan. And when you break your fast, when you see the moon, you break your fast, meaning it's Eid. فَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ. And if it becomes cloudy, you can't see anything. فَأَكْمِلُوا عِدَّةَ شَعْبَانَ 30. Complete 30 days from Sha'ban. Right? Because Sha'ban, the month before Ramadan, is going to be 30 days. The day after that has to be Ramadan. So if it becomes cloudy over you, then he says complete 30 days from Sha'ban and then fast the next day as Ramadan if you cannot sight the moon. Okay? Again, that's an authentic hadith, and that's obviously closest to Sunnah, and that's in regards to the tradition of Islam and the words of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So now we're going to get into the fiqh of moon sighting. Fasting Ramadan is only obligatory when the new moon of Ramadan is sighted, the crescent, i.e. in respect to the person who sees it, though for those who do not see it, it only becomes obligatory when the sighting is established by testimony of an upright witness. Okay, so if you see the moon, the crescent, before Ramadan, okay, the night before Ramadan, then you know yourself, tomorrow's Ramadan. You must fast as an individual. But it doesn't become obligatory upon everybody until it has been an established testimony. You've now testified to the Hatem, the ruler, which would be like the Imam or Mufti, and then it's something that's established, and then it becomes obligatory for the public. Okay? It becomes obligatory when sighting is established by testimony of an upright witness. What does upright mean here? The definition of upright means that their good deeds outweigh their bad deeds, that they do not openly, publicly commit major sins, and they do not consistently do minor sins openly and publicly. Whatever they do in their household or in private, that's between them and Allah. But publicly, they're not doing these things, and that person is generally considered upright. If they're not doing that, and their good deeds outweigh their bad deeds. If it is too overcast to be seen, then like in Seattle, right? It's cloudy a lot. If it is too overcast to be seen, then the preceding lunar month of Sha'ban is presumed to last for 30 days. And you fast Sha'ban for 30 days, after which people begin fasting Ramadan. If the new moon is sighted during the day, so if you actually see the moon during the day, that's possible. Before the noon, before the zenith of the sun, on the last of the 30 days, it is considered as belonging to the following night. And the ruling for that day does not change. So if you actually see the moon during the daytime, before noon, it's considered for the following night. So fasting would be tomorrow, right? Not that day. If the moon is seen in one city but not another. This is a big topic, right? If the moon is sighted in one city and another. And again, I'm going to get into the difference of opinion about it. Okay, this is obviously a traditional Shafi classical text. You know, that's one of the higher advanced levels of fiqh in the higher level book. If the moon is seen in one city but not the other, then if the two are close, meaning the same longitude, the same time zone, in the same region, the ruling that the new month has come holds for both. The ruling that the new month, the crescent, holds for both. Okay? So like they say in Chile has the same longitude. So it's just the same region. Well, maybe that's too far, but if it's the same region, the same time zone, then that's something that would be considered valid if the moon is sighted in that same longitude. Okay? But if the two are not close, then not. Then they're not. So if they're not close to each other, then they cannot go by the same sighting. It's actually, even during the time of Sahaba radiallahu anhu, they had a difference of opinion about when Ramadan came in. In Islamic history, they might be fasting in Sham, but not, in Iraq or in Yemen. They might be fasting in Yemen, but not in Egypt. Even the Muslims at the time. It is possible that they actually fast at different times according to their local moon sighting. The issue is not fasting on different days in different localities or regions. The issue is fasting different days in the same locality and region. Alright, that's the issue that divides the ummah today. Okay? But if the two are not close, then not. He says, the people far from the place where it has been seen are not obliged to fast. So if somebody's far from where the moon has been sighted and they're not in the same longitude, then they don't have to fast the same that they're doing. Because things are different, right? Different time zones, different areas, different places. Not close meaning different regions such as the Hijaz, Iraq, and Egypt. So if somebody's in the Hijaz, which is in Saudi Arabia, or somebody's in Iraq, or somebody's in Egypt, these are three different regions. So you don't actually go by what they're doing in Iraq if you're in the Hijaz. You don't go by what they're doing in Egypt if you're in Iraq. Right? Let alone go by Hijaz or Pakistan or India or any other place or Yemen and you're in Seattle. Right? So you don't have to actually go by another region when you're. So the testimony of a single witness that the new moon has been seen. So and then the difference of opinion lies in this is that there are three basic different of opinions about sighting of the moon. And what you have is what's the closest to the sunnah and the greatest position, which is considered local moon sighting. Okay, your local area, your local community, the scholars, the imams, they go out, they sight the moon or not. If it's cloudy, they wait 30 days from Sha'ban, even if it's different in a different area. Okay, even if, let's say, in New York they're fasting, but in Seattle they're not, because they didn't sight the moon. That's fine, because sighting the moon is considered an act of worship. All right. Now, the second opinion is if you cannot cite the moon locally, then it's nationally. Like the ruler, the president of a country, if he declares that tomorrow's Ramadan, it becomes obligatory, it can become obligatory on the entire country, then he's the ruler over. So it can be a national site. They cited it in North America, they cited it in Chicago, they cited it in New York, then all of America, and even possibly North America could fast. Right? So more national, like local site. That's a valid opinion. It's after local. Local is the best, closest to Sunnah. Then you have a difference of opinion where you have national, and then the furthest and the weakest opinion, although valid, is global moon sighting. That is a valid opinion that comes actually out of the Hanafi method, right? That you can actually globally cite. If a Muslim who fulfills the conditions of testimony cites the moon anywhere in the world, and I'm talking about just one country or a government employee that says this, I mean, anywhere in the world a Muslim cites the moon, then it can be considered a valid testimony for the whole world to fast, the whole Muslim world to fast the next day of Ramadan. That's called global citing. These three positions with the difference of opinion are valid, in order. What is not traditionally valid is pure calculations. To just make incumbent and obligatory upon the public to fast Ramadan purely by calculation. And I'll tell you why. People say, well, how does that make sense? We calculate our prayer times. Why can't we calculate our moon? Right? Simplistic, very simplistic argument unless you know the reason why we do these things from an Islamic perspective. And from an Islamic perspective, we know the movement of prayer times through the movement of the sun, right? We know when Fajr comes up, the true dawn is a horizontal light in the horizon. We know when the last part of the sun falls in the horizon, a flat horizon, that's when Maghrib comes in. We know that if something is the same size of the shade of something is the size, when the shade is the size of the object, that's when Dhuhr leaves and Asr comes in, and then Asr so we have times, according to, again, difference of opinion and method, when time of prayers comes in, and we can replicate that through calculations when we find a system of when and how the sun moves. We can kind of develop a system to calculate when the prayer times are. And even those aren't always accurate. It's not about 18 degrees, 15 degrees. It's not about this Islamic finder or this, or we're going by Muslim League, it's about the movement of the sun. That's how traditionally in Islam we always understood the prayer times. If that can be replicated through calculations, then there's no problem with that. Okay? The difference between that and the sighting of the moon is the sighting of the moon. It's not about calculation of when the moon rises or when the moon sets. They can calculate that to the T. They know in the next 5 years when the moon will rise and when it will set. And they can figure that out. That doesn't mean it can be seen. Okay? And so through worship and following the sunnah, it's about sighting the moon. And you can't sight it just because it is risen. And once it's sighted, then it's established that the next day is Ramadan. And that can't be known through calculation. You cannot calculate the sighting of the moon. You can calculate the rising and setting of the moon. And that's the difference. And that's why we go by physical sighting, because it's the sunnah. That's the answer. And because that's what our Prophet Muhammad tells us to do. That's the answer. And because it's the most traditional method of following our religion. So he goes and he says, the testimony of a single witness that the new moon has been seen is sufficient to establish that the month of Ramadan has come, provided the witness is upright, male, and responsible for the duties of Islam, which excludes boys who have reached the age of discernment but not puberty. So who can testify? So if one person can be a witness to testify that they saw the moon, the crescent, and that that's established through the ruler or through the local imam, then that's something that can be followed. Male and responsible for the duties of Islam, meaning they're over the age of puberty. If a person knows by calculation, so if they are male, they're Muslim, and they're over the age of puberty, and they're considered upright, then they can be a witness to testify that they saw the moon, and then establish that with the local leaders and scholars, and then it becomes obligatory on the public afterwards. Okay? If a person knows by calculation, now you mentioned this is a traditional, classical, old Fiqh book, and he says, if a person knows by calculation of lunar movements or the positions of the stars that the next day is Ramadan, fasting is nevertheless not obligatory. In the Shafi method, it is permissible to do calculations or star counting. This is a lot of the things that we see, that there's a lot of problems actually come out of the Shafi method, actually. Yeah. And I specialize in, I spent 7 years studying Shafi fiqh, and a lot of it, what I have found, is two problems. Studying these issues and researching them in depth for years, what I found the problem that lies in these opinions in the Shafi method is, one, not understanding them properly, misinterpreting them, and not understanding the depth of the research and opinions in that, and the conditions that come with it, and two, misapplying them. Yes, that opinion works for Norway, Iceland, Alaska, not Seattle. So the misapplication of the actual opinion or the misunderstanding of the opinion is what I found to be a problem with some of the opinions that come out of the Shafi method and how people will justify certain things. So if somebody does calculation, it's possible, it's permissible. Star counting, they used to do that. It's permissible. But if they do it for themselves, though it is permissible for that person, it is nevertheless obligatory for them to fast. So if they say, well, through my calculations and my star counting, the next day is Ramadan, fasting is not obligatory upon them or the public. Unless it has been established by the public that tomorrow is Ramadan. Okay? For him or the public, though it is permissible for him alone. Now, it is permissible for the individual, and this is where you get the difference of opinion. And this is where there's a huge confusion. It is permissible for the individual who does calculations and star counting to determine if Ramadan is the next day. It is permissible for them to follow, to believe it's Ramadan and follow and fast. It's permissible for that one person. Okay? Given that it's not proven otherwise. It's given, it's not proven otherwise. In other words, he says, my calculations show that Ramadan is in 2 days. And then they say, well, we saw the moon last night. Or we saw the moon. Oh, khalas, you gotta fast, bro. It doesn't matter what you calculated or what you did. You have to fast the next day because it's been established through the primary method of determining the moon, of the entrance of Ramadan to moon sighting. Does that make sense? Okay? So you have to follow, if it's contradicted by testimony, you have to follow that even if you calculated otherwise. But if you calculate and say, tomorrow's Ramadan, nobody sighted the moon, nobody knows, you for yourself can follow that and fast the next day of Ramadan. It cannot be made incumbent upon the public. That's the difference. It cannot be made incumbent upon the public. And say, well, guess what, everybody, Ramadan is tomorrow, the whole community is fasting because we calculated it. Now, you can do it if you yourself did. And that's why he says, though it is permissible for him alone. If it is difficult to learn which month it is for someone imprisoned or the like, such as someone being held in a dark place who cannot tell night from day, or someone who does not know when Ramadan has come because of being in a land without habitations, or people who know when it is, then such a person is obliged to reckon Ramadan as best he can do and fast it. Such a fast is valid. So basically he's talking about somebody who's in prison or somebody who's in a cave for a year. When does Ramadan come in? They don't know. So what do? Such a person is obliged to reckon Ramadan. They must try to calculate through ijtihad when Ramadan comes in. As best as he can do it and fast it. Then he has to fast. He said, well, I think, Ramadan was, 6 months ago, and I think 6 months have gone by. So I have to fast. So he guesses. Ramadan as best he can. If fasted, such a fast is valid if it remains unknown as to whether the month. So if it remains unknown, if it was Ramadan or not, his fast counts. Okay? For 30 days. As to whether the month fasted actually coincided with Ramadan, or if it did coincide with it, or with the month fasted occurred after. So if it coincided with Ramadan or the month after it, it counts. If he never finds out, it counts. Though if the month fasted was before Ramadan, it is not valid. However, he finds out, he gets outside the cave, and he said, Alhamdulillah, I fasted Ramadan. They said, actually, Ramadan's next month. Oh man, poor guy, he's got to fast 60 days. He's got to fast the real Ramadan, that one didn't count because it's before Ramadan. Okay? The conditions of a valid fast. This part is really important because it's going to get into, is your fast sound or not? The conditions of a valid fast are the intention and refraining from things which break the fast. Then he's going to go into what is that. The intention, one must make the intention to fast for each day one fast. If the intended fast is obligatory, then the intention must be specific as to the one fast for being for Ramadan, a vow, an expiation, or whatever. So if you make the intention, the Prophet Muhammad says, إِنَّمَا أَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَلِكُلِّ إِمْرِئٍ مَا نَوَىٰ. Actions are only by intentions. and for every individual is that which he or she intended. If you are fasting the next day in Ramadan, you must make as a condition the intention the night before. You have from Maghrib till Fajr to make your intention for the next day. Okay? That intention in the Shafi madhab, you must be specific. Is if you're fasting Ramadan, if you're taking a vow, an oath, or it's an expiation, or whatever reason, you must mention that. So what is the fasting intention? This is really important. نويت فرض الصوم عن شهر رمضان غدا هذه السنة. I intend the obligatory fast of Ramadan tomorrow for this year for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I intend the obligatory fast of Ramadan tomorrow this year for the sake of Allah. You must have that intention in your heart, and it's sunnah to say on your tongue. Have it in your heart, sunnah to say in your tongue, after Maghrib has entered and before Fajr comes in the Shafi method, for your fast to be valid the next day. If you miss your intention, you still have to fast the next day. It doesn't count though, you got to make it up later. You still got to fast the next day, it doesn't count, you got to make it up later. Now, there is some dispensation. In the Hanafi method, you have from when Maghrib comes in until halfway between Fajr and Maghrib, like around Dhuhr. Halfway between when Fajr comes in and Maghrib comes in, you have that time to make your, by that time to make your intention for that day, even if it's past Fajr. Okay? When does it start though? After Maghrib. The easiest is the Maliki method. Is you make your intention to fast the night before Ramadan for the whole month. If you happen to miss that, you do it the next night. Okay? You make your intention to fast the whole month of Ramadan the night before Ramadan starts for the whole month. You make it once and that's it, you're done. So at least you can fall back on that one if you miss your intention on a daily basis. Some people, they put a postcard on the door, some people on the mirror, some people on the fridge, right? When you break your fasting. Put something to remind you that you have to make your intention after Maghrib, maybe before Fajr in the Shafi method, and then the Hanafi and then the Maliki, right? Otherwise, you got to make up that day. You don't want to fast the whole day just to make it up, right? You still got to fast, but you don't want to have to make it up. So this intention is super important and is a condition in all three of those methods. It is a condition for the validity of your fast. Without it, your fast doesn't count. So be specific as to the fasting. So are you fasting in Ramadan? Is it a vow? Is it expiation? Is it makeup? So you have to say, is it makeup? Is it for Ramadan? What is it for? And be made the night prior to dawn. For Hanafis, the intention for a day of Ramadan, but not a makeup, is valid if made before midway between true dawn and sunset of the day itself. We talked about that. That's an idea, al-ala'iyya. This is a book in the Hanafi method. The optimal way is to intend in one's heart to fast the following day as a current performance of the obligation of Ramadan in the present year for Allah the Most High, that we talked about. Fast end of Ramadan being unanimously considered as an integral to the intention. So you have to say, I fast the month of Ramadan. I fast the obligatory month of Ramadan. You have to say that. Or you have to have that in your heart. Though scholars differ concerning obligatoriness of intending it as a current performance, an obligation, or for Allah the Most High. If one's intention is valid, if on the night before a day of uncertainty as to whether it is the first day of Ramadan, someone one trusts, but who does not have the qualifications of an acceptable witness, informs one of having seen the new moon, and relying on this information, one intends to fast the next day to fulfill the obligation of Ramadan, and the next day turns out to be Ramadan. So basically he's saying in this paragraph, he's saying that if somebody informs you that tomorrow is Ramadan, but they don't fulfill the conditions, let's say a Muslim who's a sinner, a deviant sinner, says Ramadan is tomorrow, and you believe that person, you believe that, you don't think they're going to lie about that, then you can actually fast tomorrow as the month of Ramadan. So one's intention is valid. You can make the intention, and it is valid to fast the next day if that's the case. Someone who trusts but does not have the qualifications of an acceptable witness informs one of having seen the new moon, and relying on this information, one intends to fast the next day to fulfill the obligation of Ramadan, and the next day turns out to be Ramadan, but one's fast is not valid if one makes the intention without anyone having informed one of the sighting of the moon, no matter whether if one's intention is firm or whether undecided, as to one intends that if the following day is Ramadan, one will fast, but if not, one will not. So long story short is if somebody then never hears anybody say that tomorrow's Ramadan through trustworthy news or reports or through a trustworthy person, then they cannot make their intention for the next day if it's not confirmed. Okay? So it said, but if one's fast is not valid, if one makes the intention without anyone having informed, so you cannot make the intention if nobody informed you that tomorrow is Ramadan or they decided the moon. No matter if one's intention is firm or whether undecided, as one intends that the following day is Ramadan, one will fast, but if not, so you cannot say, well, if tomorrow is Ramadan, I'm going to fast, and if it is not, then I'm not going to fast. You can't actually do that. Unless somebody informs you or says they sighted the moon, otherwise you can't just say, well, I think if tomorrow is Ramadan, I'm fasting, if it's not, I'm not going to fast, and just for no reason whatsoever. Okay, that would actually be inappropriate. He says, however, one's fast is valid if on the night before the 30th of Ramadan, one intends that by the following day, that is Ramadan, one will fast, but if not, one will not. So it is valid though, on the 30th day of Ramadan, and you say, on the 29th day, you say, hey, if tomorrow is Ramadan, I'm going to fast. If it's not, then I'm not going to fast. You can do that. Okay, the point of this whole thing is, if you make your intention before Ramadan comes in, for no reason whatsoever, there's no report, there's no sighting, there's no nothing, you're intending to fast the next day, and without any confirmation that it's Ramadan, that is something that is invalid. Okay? But if the 29th, it could be Eid tomorrow, it could be Ramadan. You say, well, if it's Ramadan, I intend to fast, and if it's Eid, then I intend not to fast. That's valid. That's valid, you can do that. And that's basically what he's saying here. And then the next day is a Ramadan, since it is already Ramadan, and initial presumption is that it will remain so. Non-obligatory fasts are valid by merely making the intention to fast before noon without needing to specify the type of fast. So if it's a non-obligatory fast, it is permissible to make your intention just fasting a supererogatory fast without specifying what it is. So in other words, and you have all the way till noon when Dhuhr enters. So if you say, well, it's just you want to fast today, you would have until noon, until Dhuhr enters, to say, Nawaitu Sawm, I intend to fast. You don't have to specify a supererogatory fast. However, if it's like you want to fast the 6 days of Shawwal after Ramadan, then you say, Nawaitu Sawm, Sittata Ayyam of Shawwal, I intend to fast the 6 days of Shawwal. Our Prophet Muhammad says, whoever fasts the whole month of Ramadan, and then the 6 days of Shawwal, the 6 days in the month of Shawwal, the following month, it can be any 6 days, but the best is to do it the 6 days right after Eid. Then it's as if they fast the entire year.